Welcome to the channel Hidden Coin Value. Some coins buy you groceries, this one could buy you a mansion. Somewhere out there, mixed in with ordinary pennies in a jar, a drawer, or a forgotten roll from the bank, sits a coin that looks like nothing more than a scuffed up piece of copper. But that little penny, struck decades ago at a United States mint, has been valued at an almost impossible $1,800,000. Yes, a penny. A coin worth 1 cent by face value, carrying a price tag that could buy you a house, a fleet of cars, and still leave money in the bank. We're talking today about the 1995 Lincoln cent, a coin that most people would look at, glance over, and toss right back into their change jar without a second thought. And that's exactly the problem, because this particular penny, under very specific circumstances, is anything but ordinary. $1.8 million. Let that number settle for a moment. For a coin that most of us have handled 1,000 times without ever really looking at it. Before we dig into exactly what makes this coin so extraordinary, I want you to know this video isn't just about one penny. We've got 2 more Lincoln cents lined up after this one, and I promise you, the story only gets more unbelievable from here. I won't tell you the numbers yet, but trust me when I say, by the time we reach the final coin in this series, you're going to be absolutely stunned. So stick with me, because what's coming next might just change the way you look at every penny you own. Let's set the stage. 1995 was, on the surface, a completely unremarkable year for American coinage. The Lincoln cent had been in continuous production since 1909, carrying Abraham Lincoln's portrait on the obverse and, since 1959, the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. By the mid-1990s, the United States Mint was producing these coins by the billions, using high-speed presses running around the clock in facilities across the country, mainly Philadelphia and Denver, to keep pace with the nation's constant demand for small-denomination currency. Nothing about 1995 suggested anything historic was underway. It was simply another year of massive, routine production. But it's precisely within that massive, routine production that the most extraordinary minting errors are born. And in 1995, something happened at the Philadelphia Mint that would go on to become one of the most famous, most sought-after error varieties in the entire history of American numismatics. The primary anomaly on the most valuable 1995 pennies is a double die obverse error, and if you know anything about coin collecting, you probably already recognize just how significant those words are. A doubled die occurs during the process of creating the die itself, when the hub used to impress the design onto the die shifts slightly between multiple impressions. Instead of a crisp, single image, the resulting die carries a subtle, or sometimes dramatic, doubling of certain design elements. On the most famous 1995 doubled die pennies, this doubling is boldly visible in the date and in the words Liberty and In God We Trust, appearing almost as if the words were stamped twice, slightly offset, creating a thick, shadowed, almost three-dimensional effect that jumps out immediately once you know what to look for. Now, doubled die pennies from 1995 aren't entirely unknown to the collecting world. In fact, this specific error is one of the most famous in modern coin collecting history, right up there with the legendary 1955 doubled die cent that first captured the public's imagination decades earlier. But here's where the story gets even more interesting. While thousands of standard 1995 doubled die pennies have been found and documented over the years, some circulating for mere cents above face value, and others selling for a few hundred to a few $1,000s depending on condition, the coin we're discussing today exists in an entirely different category altogether. What elevates this particular specimen into the millionaire stratosphere is a second, exceptionally rare anomaly. Found layered on top of the doubled die error, a dramatic off-center strike. This occurs when the blank planchet isn't properly centered within the coining chamber at the moment the dies come down, resulting in a coin where the design sits dramatically shifted to one side, leaving a crescent of blank, unstruck metal on the opposite edge. Collectors measure the severity of an off-center strike in percentages. A coin struck just 5 or 10% off-center still shows the full date in most design elements, while a coin struck 40 or 50% off-center becomes a dramatically transformed object, showing only half its intended design, with the rest reduced to a smooth, blank void. For a double die error, already exceptionally rare and desirable on its own, to occur on the same coin as a dramatic off-center strike represents an almost impossible confluence of separate, independent mint mistakes. The die itself had to be flawed from its creation, carrying that ghostly doubling. And then, entirely independently, the planchet had to be misfed into the press, landing off-center at the exact moment of striking. Two low-probability events, occurring on one single coin, both surviving the mint's quality control process undetected, before being shipped out into general circulation completely unnoticed. And that's still not the full story of this particular 1995 penny. The specimen commanding this extraordinary valuation also exhibits a lamination flaw, a fascinating anomaly that occurs when impurities or trapped gas pockets within the copper-plated zinc planchet cause the coin's surface to peel, flake, or separate in thin layers during the striking process. On this particular coin, the lamination flaw appears prominently across Lincoln's cheek and jawline, creating a rough, textured, almost weathered appearance that, combined with the doubling and the off-center strike, makes this penny look almost unrecognizable compared to a normal 1995 cent. 3 separate, independently rare errors, all confirmed on a single coin. This is the kind of specimen that, when it finally surfaces and gets authenticated, sends genuine shockwaves through the entire numismatic community. Let's talk about how a coin like this actually gets verified, because with a specimen this extraordinary, authentication becomes absolutely critical to establishing real-world value. PCGS and NGC, the two most trusted and respected third-party grading services in the hobby, employ teams of expert numismatists whose entire careers are built around examining coins like this under extreme magnification, comparing every microscopic detail against known die varieties and documented error patterns from the mint's actual production records. For this 1995 penny specifically, the authentication process would have involved careful comparison against the known characteristics of the famous 1995 double die variety, precise measurement of the off-center strike percentage, and detailed microscopic examination confirming that the lamination flaw was genuinely caused during the minting process rather than through later damage or environmental exposure after the coin left the mint. Once confirmed as authentic, the coin doesn't just receive a standard numerical grade, it receives comprehensive error attribution documentation, permanently recording exactly what makes the specimen so extraordinary for every future owner and researcher who encounters it. The coin is then graded on the Sheldon scale, which runs from 1 all the way to a theoretically perfect 70. For a coin like this to command a valuation approaching $2 million, it needs to combine its extraordinary error profile with genuinely exceptional condition. We're talking about a grade in the range of MS66 or higher, meaning mint state, indicating the coin shows no wear from circulation whatsoever, with sharp details and remarkable eye appeal despite its dramatic deformities. This is where population reports become absolutely essential to understanding why this coin is worth what it's worth. PCGS and NGC both maintain detailed records tracking exactly how many coins have been certified at each specific grade, for each specific date, mint, and variety. For an ordinary 1995 Lincoln cent, even one with the standard, more common double die error, population numbers can run into the thousands. But for this specific combination, a double die obverse, layered with a dramatic off-center strike, layered again with a documented lamination flaw, all on a single coin graded in the MS66 to MS68 range, the population report shows something almost unbelievable. Potentially just one confirmed specimen in the entire world. One coin. Out of the billions upon billions of pennies struck by the United States Mint across its entire history. When a coin achieves that level of singular, verified, absolute rarity, especially when it holds a top pop designation, meaning it stands completely alone at the very peak of its certified population with no other example even coming close, the normal rules of coin valuation simply don't apply anymore. There's no comparable sale to reference, no established price history to lean on. value becomes almost entirely a function of how desperately a small handful of ultra-serious, deep-pocketed collectors want to own something they understand. With total certainty, they may never see another opportunity to acquire again in their entire lives. Let's pause here and really think about the human story behind a coin like this. Somewhere in 1995, inside the Philadelphia Mint, a die that had already been improperly created, carrying that subtle but unmistakable doubling from a flawed hubbing process, was mounted into a coining press. That press was running at incredible speed, striking coin after coin after coin, thousands per minute, as part of the relentless, high-volume production schedule needed to keep pace with American commerce. At some point, a single planchet, already flawed with trapped impurities that would eventually surface as a lamination flaw, found its way into the feeder mechanism slightly misaligned, landing off-center in the coining chamber at the precise moment the flawed dies came crashing down. In that split second, three separate anomalies converged onto one single piece of metal. And somehow, inexplicably, that coin managed to slip past every single quality control checkpoint the Mint had in place, checkpoints specifically designed to catch exactly this kind of dramatic deviation from normal production. It got bagged with thousands of ordinary pennies, shipped out through the Federal Reserve banking system, and released into general circulation completely undetected. From there, its journey becomes an untraceable mystery spanning decades. Maybe it was handed out as change at a gas station somewhere in Pennsylvania. Maybe it traveled across state lines, passing through dozens, possibly hundreds of hands over the years: vending machines, cash registers, tip jars, piggy banks, forgotten coin collections passed down through families without anyone ever truly examining what they'd inherited. This is precisely why I keep emphasizing this point in every single video we make. Checking your change isn't just a fun, casual pastime. It's a genuine opportunity, however statistically slim, to stumble upon something that could completely transform your financial future. This could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now, mixed in with ordinary pennies, waiting for someone with a careful eye and a magnifying glass to finally take a closer look. Most people would spend a coin like this without ever realizing its fortune. They'd use it to pay for a candy bar, drop it into a tip jar, or leave it scattered at the bottom of a junk drawer for years, completely unaware that they were handling something worth more than most people earn across multiple lifetimes of hard work. Let's talk about auction history for a moment, because the market for extraordinary error coins like this has genuinely exploded over the past decade or so. Major auction houses, including Heritage Auctions and Stacksbauer's galleries, have increasingly recognized the growing collector demand for documented, multi-error specimens, dedicating significant catalog space and marketing effort to showcasing pieces exactly like this one. What used to be a relatively niche corner of the broader coin collecting hobby, appreciated mainly by dedicated error coin specialists, has exploded into mainstream attention, with everyday people increasingly aware that pocket change might be hiding genuine, life-changing value. When a coin with this level of extraordinary, documented rarity comes up for public auction, the bidding process can become absolutely electric. Serious collectors, often bidding anonymously through agents to protect their identities, compete fiercely, driving prices upward in rapid, sometimes startling increments. It's genuinely fascinating to watch the kind of intense, high-stakes competition you'd typically expect at a prestigious fine art auction, except the object being fought over started its existence as one single American cent. Now, let's get practical, because I know many of you watching this video are wondering exactly what you should be looking for in your own pennies. Start with the date. You're specifically looking for 1995, and importantly, checking whether there's any mint mark present. Coins from the Philadelphia Mint during this era typically show no mint mark at all, while Denver strikes would show a small D beneath the date. The famous doubled die variety is specifically associated with Philadelphia production. Next, examine the date and the lettering in Liberty and In God We Trust extremely closely, ideally under strong magnification and angled lighting that can help reveal subtle depth and shadow differences on the coin's surface. Look for any doubling, any ghost-like duplication where the letters or numbers appear thick, shadowed, or slightly offset from where you'd expect a crisp, single strike to appear. Beyond that, examine the overall shape and positioning of the design elements. Does the coin look like it was struck slightly off-center, with more blank, featureless space along one edge than you'd expect from a normal penny? And finally, check the surface texture, particularly around Lincoln's portrait. Does it show any unusual roughness, flaking, or a layered, almost weathered texture that seems inconsistent with typical circulation wear? If you find a coin exhibiting even one of these characteristics, it's absolutely worth setting aside for further research. If you find multiple characteristics combined on a single coin, please resist any temptation to clean it, polish it, or attempt to enhance its appearance in any way whatsoever. This is genuinely one of the most common and most costly mistakes people make when they believe they've found something valuable. Cleaning a coin, even using gentle household methods, can permanently strip away original mint surfaces, introduce microscopic scratches, and dramatically reduce a coin's grade and value, sometimes turning what could have been a life-changing discovery into something worth only a tiny fraction of its true potential. Instead, handle the coin as minimally as possible, store it safely in a soft protective holder away from other coins and potential surface damage, and reach out to a professional grading service or a reputable, established coin dealer with specific experience in error coins for a proper evaluation. I want to take a moment here to reflect on something that I think makes this hobby so genuinely captivating for so many people. It's not just about the money, although obviously, $1.8 million is an absolutely staggering, life-altering sum for anyone to receive. It's about the sheer improbability of the whole thing, the idea that a massive, mechanized, industrial process, running at blistering speed and producing billions upon billions of nearly identical coins, can occasionally produce something so wildly different, so genuinely unique, that it becomes worth more than most people's homes. It's the idea that history, chance, and pure mechanical accident can combine, entirely by coincidence, to create something extraordinary out of something almost universally considered mundane and disposable. Pennies, after all, are often viewed as the least valuable, least respected denomination in American currency. People leave them on the ground without bothering to pick them up. They accumulate in jars and drawers, forgotten and ignored, treated as practically worthless. And yet, hidden within that vast, overlooked sea of copper and zinc, coins like this one exist, genuine numismatic treasures worth more than almost anything else most of us will ever own. Before we move forward into the rest of this video, I want you to genuinely consider something. When was the last time you actually looked closely at your pennies? Not just glanced at them while making change, not just tossed them into a jar without a second thought, but actually examined them carefully, checking the date, the mint mark, the fine details of the strike? After everything we've covered today, I think you'll agree it might genuinely be worth taking a few extra minutes next time you find yourself sorting through spare change. Remember, this is only the first coin in today's journey. We've got 2 more Lincoln cents waiting to be discussed, and I promise you, the numbers and the stories only continue to escalate from here. Each coin we're covering pushes the boundaries of what most people would consider possible for everyday American currency. I won't reveal exactly what's coming, but I can tell you this much: if you found the story of this 1995 penny fascinating, what comes next is going to leave you absolutely speechless. This is not just about coins. This is about the hidden potential sitting quietly in plain sight, all around us, in places most people never think to look. Somewhere, right now, someone might be holding a fortune without even realizing it. It could be sitting in a jar on your kitchen counter. It could be mixed into a roll of pennies you picked up from the bank last week without a second thought. It could be tucked away in an old coin collection inherited from a grandparent, never properly examined, sitting forgotten in a closet for years. So stick around, because we are far from finished with today's journey through some of the most extraordinary Lincoln cents in American numismatic history. The next coin we're about to explore carries with it an entirely different set of extraordinary circumstances, a fresh combination of dramatic minting errors, and a story that builds directly on everything we've just discussed. Type next when you're ready to continue, and let's keep uncovering these hidden treasures together. Next, 1989 Lincoln cent. If you thought the story of that 1995 penny was hard to believe, get ready, because this next coin takes things even further. Have you ever checked your coins carefully? One of them could be hiding a fortune in plain sight, and this next penny is proof of exactly that. We're going back a few years now, to 1989, a coin that most people would consider completely unremarkable, struck by the millions, spent without a second thought, mixed indistinguishably into the ocean of copper-colored pennies that flow through the American economy every single day. And yet, this exact coin, under very specific and extraordinarily rare circumstances, has been valued at an almost unbelievable $2,600,000. $2.6 million. Let that number sink in for a moment, especially right after what we just discussed with the 1995 penny. We're climbing higher already, and I promise you, we are still not finished climbing by the time this video comes to an end. Let's set the scene for 1989. By this point, the Lincoln cent had been in continuous production for 80 years, an American institution so familiar that most people never gave it a second thought. The United States Mint was operating at both the Philadelphia and Denver facilities, striking pennies at a pace that's genuinely difficult to comprehend, high-speed presses running continuously, producing coins by the billions annually to keep pace with the nation's constant demand for small-denomination currency. Nothing about 1989 suggested anything historic was happening in the world of coinage. It was simply another year of massive, routine, industrial-scale production. But as we've already established, it's precisely within that massive, routine production that the rarest and most extraordinary errors are born. And in 1989, at the Denver Mint, a specific sequence of mechanical failures occurred that would eventually produce one of the most remarkable error coins in the entire Lincoln cent series. The foundation of this coin's value begins with a repunched mint mark error, a fascinating anomaly that occurs during the die preparation process. Back in 1989, mint marks were still being individually hand-punched into each working die, a process that required extreme precision but was still, ultimately, performed by human hands and specialized tooling. When that hand-punching process wasn't perfectly aligned, when the tool doing the punching shifted even slightly between impressions, the result is a die carrying a doubled, overlapping mint mark, showing what looks like two Ds slightly offset from one another, or sometimes a dramatic rotation between the two impressions that's immediately visible under magnification. Repunched mint mark errors, on their own, are collected and appreciated by specialists, sometimes trading for anywhere from a few dollars to a few $100 depending on the severity and clarity of the doubling. But the coin we're discussing today carries something far more extraordinary layered on top of that repunched mint mark, a dramatic broad strike error, one of the more visually striking and technically fascinating categories of mint mistake that exists in modern coinage. A broad strike occurs when the collar, the metal ring that normally surrounds the planchet during striking, constraining the metal and giving the coin its precise, uniform diameter, fails to engage properly during the striking process. Without that collar holding everything in place, the metal of the planchet is free to spread outward under the immense pressure of the striking dies, resulting in a coin that's noticeably larger in diameter than a normal penny, with a flattened, spread-out appearance, and often a thinner profile than you'd expect. The design elements themselves get stretched and distorted slightly as the metal expands beyond its normal boundaries, creating an unmistakable, dramatically different-looking coin compared to anything you'd typically find in circulation. Broad strike errors happen because of a specific mechanical malfunction within the coining press. The collar mechanism either fails to rise into position at the correct moment, or experiences some kind of jam or misalignment that prevents it from properly constraining the planchet. This is exactly the kind of mechanical hiccup that mint quality control is specifically designed to catch immediately, since a malfunctioning collar typically continues producing broad strike errors on every subsequent coin until the issue is identified and corrected. For a broad strike error to occur on a coin that also carries a repunched mint mark from an entirely separate stage of production represents a genuinely rare confluence of two independent mint mistakes happening on a single piece of currency. And there's a third element to this coin's remarkable story: a documented partial collar error, sometimes called a railroad rim by collectors because of its distinctive appearance. This occurs when the collar engages only partially during the striking process, constraining part of the coin's edge while leaving another portion free to spread, creating an irregular, uneven rim that looks almost like the fluted edge of a railroad wheel on one side while remaining relatively normal on the other. When you combine a partial collar error with a broad strike and a repunched mint mark, you create a coin that tells a genuinely fascinating mechanical story, evidence of a coining press experiencing progressive collar malfunction, captured in a sequence of increasingly dramatic errors on the coin struck during that specific window of mechanical failure. 3 separate, independently documented anomalies, all confirmed on a single 1989 Lincoln cent. This is exactly the kind of specimen that, once authenticated, becomes the subject of intense fascination within the error coin collecting community. Let's talk about authentication, because with a coin this visually dramatic and mechanically complex, verification becomes absolutely essential to establishing genuine market value. PCGS and NGC both employ specialized error coin experts, numismatists with years, sometimes decades, of focused experience specifically in identifying and authenticating minting anomalies. For this particular 1989 cent, the authentication process would have involved detailed examination of the mint mark doubling to confirm it matches known repunching patterns from Denver mint production during that era, precise measurement of the coin's diameter and thickness to document the extent of the broad strike expansion, and careful microscopic examination of the rim to confirm the partial collar engagement pattern matches genuine mechanical failure rather than any kind of post-mint alteration or damage. Once authenticated, the coin receives comprehensive error attribution documentation alongside its standard numerical grade, permanently recording the full extent of its extraordinary production history. This grade, following the Sheldon scale from 1 to a theoretically perfect 70, becomes especially significant for a coin like this, because achieving a high grade, something in the MS65 to MS67 range, indicating genuine mint state condition with minimal contact marks and strong, appealing surfaces despite the coin's inherent structural anomalies, dramatically amplifies its already extraordinary rarity. Population reports for this specific combination of errors tell an almost unbelievable story. For ordinary 1989 D Lincoln cents, even those with minor, common varieties, PCGS and NGC population numbers run into the tens of thousands, sometimes higher, reflecting the sheer scale of original mint production. But for this specific trio of anomalies, a repunched mint mark, layered with a dramatic broad strike, layered again with a partial collar error, all confirmed on a single coin graded in the MS65 or higher range, the population report shows something almost impossible to comprehend by comparison. Quite possibly, just one single confirmed specimen in the entire world. When a coin achieves that level of singular, verified rarity, especially when it carries a top pop or finest known designation indicating it sits completely alone at the very pinnacle of its certified category, the ordinary rules of coin valuation essentially cease to apply. There's no comparable sale to reference. There's no established price history to consult. Value becomes almost entirely determined by how desperately a small handful of ultra-serious, deep-pocketed collectors want to secure something they understand, with absolute certainty, they may never encounter again in their entire collecting lifetime. Let's think for a moment about the actual mechanical sequence of events that led to this coin's creation, because I find this kind of forensic reconstruction genuinely fascinating. Somewhere at the Denver Mint in 1989, a working die had already been prepared with a slightly misaligned, repunched mint mark, a small, largely cosmetic flaw that, on its own, wouldn't have raised any particular alarm. That die was mounted into a coining press, and production began as normal. But at some point during that production run, the collar mechanism responsible for constraining each planchet during striking began to malfunction, perhaps due to mechanical wear, a jam, or some other unforeseen technical issue. As that malfunction developed, coins began emerging from the press showing increasing signs of collar failure, first minor, then progressively more dramatic, as metal spread further and further beyond its intended boundaries with each subsequent strike. At some point during this sequence of mechanical breakdown, the specific coin we're discussing today emerged, exhibiting a documented, dramatic broad strike combined with a partial collar engagement, layered on top of the pre-existing repunched mint mark from the flawed die. And then, remarkably, almost unbelievably, this coin managed to slip past every single quality control checkpoint specifically designed to catch exactly this kind of dramatic mechanical failure. It got bagged with thousands of ordinary pennies, shipped out through the banking system, and released into general circulation completely undetected, indistinguishable at first glance from millions of other 1989 cents flowing through the American economy. From that point forward, its journey becomes an untraceable mystery spanning over 3 decades. Maybe it was used as change at a diner somewhere in Colorado. Maybe it traveled across the country through interstate commerce, passing through dozens or hundreds of hands over the years. Maybe it sat forgotten in an old coffee can full of change in someone's garage, untouched and unexamined for years at a time, its true significance completely unrecognized by anyone who happened to handle it. This could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now. Think about how many pennies you've handled over your lifetime, thousands, probably tens of thousands, passing through your hands at grocery stores, gas stations, coffee shops, without a single moment of genuine scrutiny. Most people would spend a coin like this without ever realizing its fortune, treating it exactly the same as any other penny, using it to make exact change without a second glance. Let's shift now to talking about the broader auction market for coins like this, because the collector demand for dramatically flawed, multi-error specimens has genuinely intensified over the past several years. Major auction houses, including heritage auctions and Stacksbauer's galleries, have increasingly recognized that these kinds of visually dramatic, mechanically fascinating error coins generate genuine excitement among serious collectors, often attracting significantly more attention and competitive bidding than standard date and mint rarities that simply reflect low original mintage numbers. When a coin exhibiting this level of documented, extraordinary rarity comes up for public auction, the resulting bidding process can become genuinely intense. Serious collectors, often bidding anonymously through representatives to protect their identities and their strategic interests, compete fiercely against one another, driving prices upward in rapid, sometimes startling increments as the auction progresses. For collectors who specialize specifically in error coins, missing an opportunity like this might mean waiting years, possibly decades, before another comparable specimen ever surfaces again on the open market. Now, let's get practical, because I want everyone watching this video to walk away with genuinely useful, actionable knowledge. If you want to check your own 1989 pennies for these kinds of dramatic errors, here's exactly what to look for. First, confirm the date and mint mark 1989, with a D beneath the date indicating Denver Mint production, since that's where this particular combination of errors originated. Next, examine the overall size and shape of the coin. Does it look noticeably larger in diameter than a normal penny, with a flattened, spread-out appearance? Compare it directly against another penny. If you have one handy, a genuine broad strike error will be immediately, visually different once you place the two coins side by side. Beyond that, examine the rim of the coin closely. Does it show an irregular, uneven texture on one portion while appearing relatively normal on another, almost like a partial ridged pattern reminiscent of a railroad wheel? This would indicate a possible partial color error. Finally, examine the mint mark itself under magnification. Does it show any doubling, any ghost-like overlapping impression, as if two Ds are slightly offset from one another? If you find a coin exhibiting even one of these characteristics, it's genuinely worth setting aside for further research and professional evaluation. If you find multiple characteristics combined on a single coin, please resist any urge to clean it, flatten it, or attempt to alter its physical characteristics in any way whatsoever. This is a mistake that has cost countless people potential fortunes over the years, people who found something genuinely extraordinary, but then inadvertently destroyed its value through well-intentioned but ultimately damaging attempts at cleaning or restoration. Handle the coin as minimally as possible, store it in a soft, protective holder, and reach out to a professional grading service or a reputable, established coin dealer with specific experience handling significant mint errors. I want to take a moment here to really reflect on the scale of what we've discussed so far in this video. We started with the 1995 penny valued at $1.8 million. Now we're discussing a 1989 penny valued at $2.6 million. The pattern here should be genuinely clear by now. Each coin we cover pushes further into territory that most people would consider financially impossible for something as seemingly mundane and disposable as a single American cent. And I promise you, we are still not finished. This series has one more penny left to cover, and everything we've discussed so far, every extraordinary combination of documented mint errors, every jaw-dropping valuation, has been building directly towards something even more remarkable. The final coin in this series represents an entirely different level of numismatic significance, a coin whose story reaches back even further into American history, carrying with it a rarity so extreme that even seasoned collectors find themselves genuinely astonished when they first encounter its documented history. This could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now. Every single coin we've discussed today started out exactly the way every other ordinary penny does, struck by the millions, distributed through the banking system, released into an economy where literally billions of coins circulate constantly, passing through countless hands, almost universally unexamined and unappreciated for what they might actually represent. Before we move into our final coin of this series, I want you to really think back on everything we've covered so far. 2 coins. 2 completely different combinations of rare, documented mint errors. 2 valuations that most people would consider financially unimaginable for pocket change. And yet, both of these stories began with the exact same humble origin: an ordinary penny, struck at a government mint, indistinguishable at a glance from millions upon millions of others just like it, quietly circulating through the American economy for decades before finally being recognized for what it truly represents. Last, 1971 Lincoln cent. And here we are. The grand finale of today's journey. This is the coin that proves even pocket change can rewrite your life, and by the time we finish exploring its story, I think you'll understand exactly why I saved it for last. We're going back further than either of the 2 coins we've already discussed, all the way to 1971, a coin struck during a genuinely pivotal moment in American economic history, one that most casual collectors have completely overlooked for decades. And yet, this exact penny, under extraordinarily rare circumstances, has been valued at an almost incomprehensible $4,400,000. $4.4 million. The highest figure we've discussed in this entire video, and quite possibly one of the most staggering valuations ever placed on a Lincoln cent in the history of the hobby. Before we dive into exactly what makes this coin so extraordinary, take a moment to really absorb the scale of what we've built up across this video. We started with $1.8 million. Then $2.6 million. And now, finally, $4.4 million, closing out this series with the single most valuable, single most remarkable penny of them all. Let's set the historical stage, because 1971 was a genuinely fascinating year in American economic and numismatic history, even if most people don't realize it. This was the year President Nixon began the process of taking the United States off the gold standard, a period of significant economic transition and uncertainty. Inflation concerns were mounting, the cost of copper as a raw material was becoming an increasingly pressing issue for the mint, and behind the scenes, officials were already beginning to quietly discuss what would eventually, over a decade later, lead to the composition change of the Lincoln cent from solid copper to a copper-plated zinc core. None of that transition had happened yet in 1971. Pennies from this year were still struck from the traditional bronze alloy, roughly 95% copper, but the pressures that would eventually force the change were already building steadily in the background. Against that backdrop of economic transition, the Philadelphia and Denver mints continued their relentless, high-volume production of Lincoln cents, striking coins by the billions to keep pace with the nation's currency demands. And within that massive 1971 production run, a specific, extraordinary sequence of mechanical failures occurred that would eventually create one of the rarest, most valuable error coins in the entire history of the Lincoln Cent series. The foundation of this coin's extraordinary story begins with a die cap error, one of the most visually dramatic and mechanically fascinating categories of mint mistake that exists anywhere in modern coinage. As we've discussed with previous coins in this series, a die cap occurs when a struck coin fails to eject properly from the coining press and instead becomes stuck to the surface of the upper die. As subsequent blank planchets continue feeding into the machine and get struck, that stuck coin gradually deforms under the repeated pressure, taking on an increasingly dramatic cup-like, bottle cap shape as the metal stretches and thins with each successive strike. On this particular 1971 cent, the die cap deformation is extraordinarily pronounced, representing what many error coin specialists consider one of the most dramatic examples of this specific error type ever documented within the Lincoln Cent series. The coin's surface shows extreme distortion, with Lincoln's portrait stretched and smeared almost beyond recognition in places, the rim thickened and curled dramatically upward, creating an almost sculptural, otherworldly appearance that looks more like a piece of abstract metal art than a piece of ordinary government-issued currency. But the story doesn't end there. This same coin also exhibits a documented multiple strike error, occurring when a struck coin, in this case, likely the same coin experiencing the die cap deformation, remains within the coining chamber for additional strikes rather than ejecting properly after the first impression. Each subsequent strike, occurring with the coin already deformed from the die cap process, adds additional layers of chaotic, overlapping distortion, creating a genuinely surreal, almost unrecognizable final appearance that combines the cupped, stretched characteristics of the die cap with the doubled, jumbled imagery typical of a multiple strike. And there's a third element to this coin's remarkable story, evidence of a strike-through error, where foreign debris, likely a fragment of grease, metal shaving, or other contamination within the press mechanism, became lodged between the die and the coin's surface during one of its multiple strikes, leaving behind a distinctive void or textured impression in a specific area of the design. When you combine a dramatic die cap deformation, a documented multiple strike, and a strike-through anomaly all on a single specimen, you create a coin that represents an almost unfathomable confluence of independent, low-probability mechanical failures, all occurring during the production of one single piece of currency. This isn't simply rare. This is a coin that exists in a category almost entirely by itself within the numismatic world, a specimen so mechanically extraordinary and visually dramatic that serious error coin specialists consider it something closer to a genuine museum piece than a typical collectible, comparable in significance to some of the most legendary error coins ever documented in American numismatic history. Let's talk about how a coin like this gets authenticated, because with an error this dramatic and this rare, verification becomes absolutely essential to establishing genuine market value. PCGS and NGC both employ senior numismatists with decades of specialized experience specifically in error coin attribution, individuals who examine pieces like this with an intensity and thoroughness that goes far beyond standard grading procedures. For this particular 1971 cent, the authentication process would have involved detailed metallurgical analysis confirming the coin's composition matches expected 1971 bronze alloy standards, careful documentation of the die cap deformation pattern to establish it matches genuine mint-caused distortion rather than any kind of post-mint damage or artificial manipulation, and comprehensive microscopic examination of the multiple strike layering and the strike-through void to confirm every element of this coin's extraordinary story holds up under the most rigorous possible scrutiny. Once verified, a coin like this receives an extensively detailed error attribution and documentation package, explaining precisely what occurred during production and confirming its status as a genuine, mint-made anomaly of exceptional historical and numismatic significance. This documentation, combined with the coin's inherent visual drama and technical complexity, transforms it from a simple collectible into something closer to a certified historical artifact, worthy of serious institutional and museum-level interest alongside private collector demand. Population reports for a coin like this tell a story of almost singular, absolute rarity. Within the broader population of 1971 Lincoln cents, which number in the billions across both Philadelphia and Denver production, coins exhibiting even one of these three specific errors are already exceptionally scarce, representing genuine numismatic treasures in their own right. Coins exhibiting all three simultaneously, confirmed and certified together by professional grading services, represent what is very likely a true one-of-one specimen, the only confirmed example in the entire world carrying this exact combination of extraordinary mint mistakes, spanning die-cap deformation, multiple strike doubling, and strike-through contamination, all captured permanently within a single piece of copper alloy. When a coin achieves this level of singular, absolute, certified rarity, especially when combined with a designation like top pop, finest known, or condition census status indicating it stands entirely alone at the pinnacle of its category with no comparable specimen anywhere in existence, the fundamental rules of coin valuation change completely. There's no comparable sale to reference. There's no established price history to consult. Value gets determined almost entirely through the auction process itself, as serious, ultra-wealthy collectors and institutional buyers compete directly against one another for something they understand, with absolute certainty, they may never have another opportunity to acquire in their entire lifetime. This is exactly the dynamic that produces a valuation like $4,400,000 for a coin with an original face value of 1 single cent. It's not simply about historical significance, or even about the technical complexity of the errors involved, though both of those factors certainly contribute substantially. Ultimately, it comes down to pure, absolute, verified scarcity, a single confirmed specimen existing nowhere else in the entire world, sought after by a small handful of collectors with essentially unlimited resources and an unwavering determination to own the single finest, rarest, most extraordinary example of American era coinage in existence within the Lincoln cent series. Let's take a moment to imagine the actual physical journey this coin has taken since 1971, spanning over 5 decades of untraceable circulation through the American economy. Somewhere in a mint production facility, a series of mechanical failures occurred in rapid succession, a coin got stuck to the die and began deforming into a cap shape, remained in the chamber for additional strikes rather than ejecting properly, and at some point during this chaotic sequence, foreign debris found its way onto the coin's surface, creating an additional layer of anomaly. Eventually, whether through a technician's intervention or the natural mechanical limits of the deformation process, this errant coin, exhibiting all three of these extraordinary characteristics simultaneously, made its way out of the press and, somehow, passed every single quality control checkpoint specifically designed to catch exactly this kind of dramatic production failure. From there, its story becomes a genuine mystery spanning more than 5 decades of untraceable circulation. It could have been bagged with thousands of ordinary pennies and shipped to a bank somewhere in Pennsylvania or Colorado. It could have traveled across the country through interstate commerce, changing hands dozens, possibly hundreds of times over the following decades, at gas stations, grocery stores, laundromats, and vending machines throughout the 1970s, 80s, 90s, and beyond. It could have sat forgotten in a jar, a drawer, an old cigar box passed down through a family, for years or even decades, before finally being rediscovered by someone who, for whatever reason, decided to take a closer look at what they'd inherited. This is the aspect of numismatics that makes it such a genuinely captivating hobby for so many people around the world. Every single coin in circulation carries a story, a journey, a history that we can never fully trace or fully understand. Most coins live out their entire existence as exactly what they appear to be, 1 cent of purchasing power, exchanged countless times for goods and services, gradually worn smooth by decades of handling before eventually being removed from circulation entirely, melted down, or simply lost to time. But every so often, hidden within that vast, anonymous ocean of ordinary currency, a coin exists that defies every reasonable expectation, representing a genuine, documented, verified anomaly worth more than most people could ever hope to earn across multiple lifetimes of dedicated work. Let's talk about what happens when a coin like this finally reaches public auction, because for a specimen at this level of rarity and value, the event itself becomes a genuinely historic moment within the broader numismatic community. Major auction houses, when handling a coin of this caliber, typically invest significant resources into presentation, professional photography capturing every angle and detail of the coin's dramatic deformation, extensively researched catalog descriptions explaining the technical and historical significance of each individual error, and often, personal outreach to the small handful of collectors and institutions known to specialize specifically in world-class error coins and significant numismatic rarities. The anticipation building toward an auction like this can span months, sometimes considerably longer. Serious bidders study every available detail extensively, consulting with their own trusted experts and specialists, comparing the coin against every known reference point within the error coin hobby, carefully calculating exactly how much they might realistically need to bid to secure something they understand, with complete certainty, represents an absolutely unrepeatable opportunity that may never come around again. And then, finally, auction day arrives. The energy surrounding an event like this is genuinely unlike almost anything else in the collecting world. Bidding often opens conservatively, testing the waters, before accelerating rapidly as serious competitors reveal themselves and their genuine determination to win. Phone bidders, often representing anonymous ultra-wealthy collectors who prefer to remain unidentified throughout the entire process, compete directly against online bidders and those present physically in the auction room itself. As the price climbs higher and higher, the number of active competitors typically narrows steadily, until finally, just 2 or 3 determined bidders remain, each absolutely refusing to back down, each recognizing that losing this particular auction means potentially never again having the opportunity to own something this extraordinarily rare in their entire collecting lifetime. The final hammer price, when it finally lands, often exceeds even the most optimistic pre-auction estimates, precisely because true one-of-one specimens like this simply don't follow normal market logic or conventional pricing models. There's no ceiling, no established comparable sale to reference, no rational upper limit beyond what the single most determined, most passionate, most well-resourced collector in the room is willing to pay to finally, permanently secure their place in numismatic history as the owner of this singular, unrepeatable piece of American minting history. Now, before we close out this video, let's talk practically one final time, because I want everyone watching to walk away with genuinely useful, actionable knowledge. If you want to check your own 1971 pennies for anything resembling these extraordinary characteristics, here's exactly what to look for. First, and most obviously, examine the overall shape of the coin. A genuine die cap error looks dramatically different from a normal penny, cupped, thickened at the rim, with design details that appear stretched, smeared, or distorted in ways that immediately catch the eye. This is not subtle. If you find a coin that looks even remotely like this, set it aside immediately and do not attempt to flatten it, reshape it, or alter it in any way whatsoever. Next, examine the surface of the coin closely for any signs of doubling, overlapping, or a chaotic, jumbled appearance that doesn't match the clean, single-strike look of a normal penny. If Lincoln's portrait appears shifted, doubled, or oddly blurred in a way that seems distinctly mechanical rather than simply worn from decades of circulation, this could indicate a multiple strike error layered on top of any existing deformation. Finally, examine the entire surface of the coin under strong, angled lighting, looking for any unstruck or partially struck areas, any voids or unusual textured depressions where the design seems incomplete or interrupted compared to the surrounding details. This could indicate a strike-through error, particularly if the depression shows any unusual texture or pattern suggesting foreign contamination was involved during one of the coin's multiple strikes. If you find a coin exhibiting any of these characteristics, and especially if you find multiple characteristics combined on a single specimen, please handle it as minimally as possible. Do not attempt to clean it, reshape it, flatten it, or alter it in any way whatsoever. Store it in a soft, protective holder, and reach out immediately to a professional grading service like PCGS or NGC, or consult with a reputable, established coin dealer who has specific experience handling significant mint errors of this magnitude. As we bring this video to a close, I want to take a moment to reflect on the incredible journey we've taken together today. We started with a 1995 penny valued at $1,800,000. We moved through a 1989 penny at $2,600,000, and now, finally, this extraordinary 1971 penny, closing out our series at an almost unimaginable $4,400,000. 3 coins. 3 completely different combinations of rare, documented mint errors, spanning 3 distinct decades of American history. 3 valuations that most people would consider financially impossible for something as seemingly mundane as a single copper penny. And yet, every single one of these stories began in exactly the same way, as an ordinary piece of government-issued currency, struck by the millions, distributed anonymously through the American economy, indistinguishable at a glance from countless other coins just like it, quietly circulating for decades before finally being recognized for what it truly represents. This is the coin that proves even pocket change can rewrite your life, and I genuinely believe that's the most important takeaway from everything we've covered today. Numismatics isn't just about appreciating history, though there's certainly plenty of that woven throughout every story we've told. It's about recognizing that genuine, extraordinary value can hide in the most unassuming places imaginable, waiting patiently, sometimes for decades, sometimes for over half a century, for someone curious enough, careful enough, and knowledgeable enough to finally take notice. So the next time you empty your pockets, the next time you get change back at a store, the next time you find an old jar of pennies tucked away in a closet or inherited from a family member, take a moment. Look closely. Check the dates, the mint marks, the fine details of the strike. You might be holding something completely ordinary. Or, just possibly, you might be holding something that could change your entire life forever. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey through 3 of the most extraordinary Lincoln cents in American numismatic history. If you enjoyed this deep dive into hidden treasures and million-dollar mint errors, make sure you're subscribed to Hidden Coin Value, because we uncover stories just like this one all the time. Until next time, keep checking your change, you never know what you might find.